Today is Sunday, June 18, 2023, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. A very happy Father's Day, especially to Colonel Bill Skillion in Orlando, Florida. It was, of course, a historic week. We knew it was coming. It didn't make it any less stunning to, for the first time in American history, watch a former U.S. president arraigned on federal charges over his handling of top secret and classified documents after leaving office. And yet, polls suggest that Donald Trump isn't losing any support among his base supporters. Meanwhile, back in Michigan, the state GOP was offering a plan that would combine a traditional primary with a caucus system that many believe would greatly enhance the chances of a Trump win in the state. It is a complicated answer to a rather complicated conundrum. We're going to talk about that a little later on. But up first, the school year wrapping up, we continue to count the losses from the pandemic, losses in learning, and many fear in the mental health of our young people. And yes, it must be said, losses in COVID money. That's creating challenges in Detroit, a district that really doesn't need budget cuts. It's the reality, though, for the state's largest school district. Superintendent Dr. Nikolai Vitti is up first today on Flashpoint. Well, summer is here, another school year is in the books, but so much remains in flux in American education, and certainly so in Detroit. Very good to have with me again the superintendent of the DPSCD, Dr. Nikolai Vitti. Dr. Vitti, good to have you back on the program.
Always good to be back.
You've had, obviously, yet another post-COVID year, really the first full one. But before we get into where you think things stand right now, I want to go back and kind of set the scene before COVID. Enrollment was up in Detroit schools. We had balanced budgets a couple of years in a row. You were out of oversight. Everything was moving the way I think you wanted it to go.
Yeah.
What did COVID end up doing to all of that, do you think?
Well, you're exactly right. Enrollment was up, student achievement improved, basically fully staffed, great financials, student attendance up, chronic absenteeism down. Pandemic hits and it just changes our work. It was all about managing COVID.
Yeah. I
felt that as superintendent, I was a superintendent COVID manager. And I think our principals felt the same way, our teachers felt the same way. It was just trying to meet our families, our students, and on my end, our employees where they were. So trying to find a balance of online learning, in-person learning, hybrid, moving materials online, feeding families, COVID distancing, quarantining, all of it, and COVID testing. So this year really felt like the first new normal year after the pandemic, and I felt like we moved away from managing COVID this year and went back to the reform work, and really excited about how we ended the year.
But you still are going to grapple with what people have, I guess, referring to as learning loss.
Yeah.
Which happened everywhere, but especially acute in places where not every house has Wi-Fi, when not every house has a computer, and of course a district like Detroit falls further behind than others.
Yeah, we certainly saw clear examples of learning loss at the individual student level and even the aggregate as we move to even the first year of online learning, definitely at the end of the first year of online learning. The year before this year was really about in and out, being in person, out with some of the COVID surges. But I'm really proud to announce and talk about where we ended this year. Because in the aggregate, based on our preliminary student achievement data, we have not only improved versus last year, but it looks like our numbers might be above pre-pandemic levels. So it's not to say that every child we've solved every child's learning loss dilemma.
Sure.
But when we look at the aggregate of about 48,000 students, in the aggregate, we're just about where we were, if not better, before the pandemic hit, which really meant that we used our COVID funding, strategically. We managed online learning the best we could. We saw that at the end of last year. At the end of last year, our learning loss was less than the state of Michigan's and less than city charter schools, which meant we did something well in an imperfect learning environment. So
I want to ask you about the COVID money, which is kind of created a weird trap for schools all over the country. The adage, don't spend one-time money on anything except one-time expenses because it's not going to be there.
Right.
And yet there was kind of all of these stipulations about by when the money had to be spent.
Correct.
Which made it very complicated.
Right.
So now that and now you've put forward a new budget, but back in March you told everybody to expect layoffs.
Yeah. Well, it was certainly needed, and I'm very grateful to the federal government that we received the COVID funding, because without that COVID funding, we would have seen more upheaval within the school system.
Mm-hmm.
With the loss of enrollment due to the pandemic, the need for PPE, COVID testing, laptops to go home, internet access,
Yep.
There were extra costs. Then we saw the reality of inflation, so the cost of everything, labor, materials, everything went up as well, energy. So we just wouldn't have had the resources to manage the district and to just stop the bleeding with all the operational challenges.
Yeah.
So, that was fortuitous, and we were able to do things we've always wanted to do: mental health in every school, expanded summer school, after school programming. But as we said, we had to be disciplined, because we could not attach one-time money with reoccurring costs, because then our hole would have only been deeper.
That's right.
Knowing the enrollment loss and inflation challenges. So I'm proud of the difficult work we did to stay disciplined, and I'm proud of the work that the school board did to stay fiscally responsible going into next year. So we have a balanced budget going in next year. Reoccurring revenue matches reoccurring expenditures. We've put money aside for another salary increase for our teachers. We protected student programming. We're not closing schools. So we made hard decisions regarding some staffing numbers. But overall,
Do you know what those cuts are yet?
Yeah, well, we're already done. So that's all done.
So,
we had to eliminate about 300 positions,
Mm-hmm.
combination of central office and school level. But what we did was we tried to be very sympathetic and considerate with hourly employees in particular, where they may not be in the same job that they were, but they had an option to stay in the district in another hourly job where we had different pots of money and vacancies, like cafeteria jobs or substitute teacher positions. The only people that really didn't have an opportunity to come back next year were central office administrators and some school-based administrators that weren't willing or able to teach. Outside of that, everyone really had an opportunity to stay.
We are understanding more and more about the kind of mental health experts and professionals that you need around.
Right.
And I wanted to make sure we spent some time talking about where you think we're all worried about the mental health of young people right now, especially coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Give me your thumbnail on what you think is going on in American schools in that way right now.
Yeah, mental health is not a new issue. I think we all know
Sure.
that. I think prior to the pandemic, there was greater understanding, sensitivity. Some of the stigma was put to the side. And we were making inroads with, for example, using a survey with all students to identify those children that had child adverse impact when they were young, identifying them for mental health support. With COVID relief funding, we put mental health support at every school, contracted, so our kids could get one-on-one small group work. The positive aspect of next year's budget is we found money to do that. So that's now with reoccurring dollars,
Yeah.
and the same kind of mental health support we provided throughout the pandemic and even as we came back will be there next year. I would say that definitely the pandemic has exacerbated the mental health of our children, and greater anxiety, isolation, all was an impact and result of the pandemic. I think on the positive, we're talking about it more. We acknowledge
Sure.
a problem. There's more resources coming from the federal government and the state. And I think this is a continuing effort to deconstruct the myths, just the insecurity that comes in with talking about it.
Yeah.
And hopefully we continue to see investment at the federal and state level, which then helps us. And I think ultimately it goes back to the conversation about equitable funding, which is in Michigan, we're still not at equal. We need to get to equitable where districts like ours that have students in greater risk receive more resources than others. And that then helps fund the mental health support, the guidance counselors, the social workers that can go deeper with children.
You know, the focus at Mackinac this past year was how do we get things to grow?
Yeah.
We got to grow population, not just in Detroit, but in the entire state. It's interesting, a lot of districts are catching up to the problems that you've had now
Correct.
for years
Yeah.
in losing students.
Yeah.
We've been covering what's going on in Grosse Pointe as they
Right.
try to figure out realigning their population with their system. Where do you feel like Detroit is right now with its ability to attract people to the city, given that schools is job one when you're a parent thinking about moving somewhere?
Yeah, well, one thing that we always look at is market share. So how many school-age children live in the city, and how many of those students are attending DPSCD?
Yeah.
And so over the last 6 years, we've seen an improvement of market share on DPSCD's part. So that means that we're doing something better and differently. And we got to continue to strive to do that. I think the best way to do that is to continue to offer diverse schools and programming, meaning this is why we've kept a single gender boys school, single gender girls school, Montessori, world language focus at Flicks, but trying to even expand those in other schools, more international baccalaureate options, more dual enrollment options, more career tech. At our high school. So the key is diversity of programming to meet the unique interests of children. It's expanding art and music classes across the K-8 level. But ultimately, the best way to attract students to our schools is to continue to raise student achievement. And I think that we're going to see another round of improvement and making individual connections, building trust with our families and our students. And I think our staff has gotten much better with that, and we're going to continue to refine that process.
We sure hope so. I don't know if you actually get a summer, because you probably have to go right back to work, getting ready for the fall.
I take a couple of days off here or there, but yeah, I'm always asked that question.
Well, it's always good to have you on the program, and
thank you.
Good luck with another school year, which is right through the windshield.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break. Dr. Nikolai Vitti from Detroit Public Schools. Back with more. We'll talk politics in just a moment on Flashpoint. Okay, wild week, of course, for political junkies. We had the indictment of former President Trump. That happened, though, against a really interesting backdrop back here. Michigan Democrats are trying to move their primary up in the national pecking order. That's creating a very complicated problem for Michigan Republicans. If they follow suit, the Republican National Committee will punish the state, basically, by negating some of its Republican votes. So what should the state GOP do? Let's talk about that with CEO of Focus Hope. Portia Roberson is here with us, as often is. Former Republican Congressman Dave Trott is back with us, and so is the editorial page editor of the Detroit News, Nolan Fenley. Friends, thanks very much for being here. Congressman Trott, let me start with you on this. This is a really interesting fix that Republicans find themselves in, and so the solution they've come up with is sort of a hybrid, a caucus, which we're not really used to very much in Michigan, more like what they do in New Hampshire, a caucus system plus a primary, but the caucus votes weigh a lot more than the primary votes.
Yeah, the caucus votes are about 70% of the 55 delegates, so it's a whole lot more important. And the same people that will be electing those delegates for the district conventions are the folks that elected Karamo as our state party chair. So you would think that it would be whoever they pick will end up being kind of on the extreme end of the Republican Party. So that's a negative. The positive is, we're not going to be penalized by the RNC, so that's a good thing. The other positive is it eliminates the potential for crossover votes for Democrats to affect the Republican primary. But at the end of the day, it really is a negative for Republicans, because I don't think the 39 delegates are going to pick someone that represents the mainstream of Republicans in our state.
In fact, by a caucus system, Nolan, almost by definition, is more insiders. Is that the way to put it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's the party activists. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly what the chairman and her small crew that's left of the party in Lansing want. They'd like to hand this thing, as many delegates as they can, to Donald Trump. The question is whether they can afford to hold these caucuses. Who's going to pay for them? Last time I looked at their monthly statements, they had this much in the bank. And, that primary, that state presidential primary that we hold every year or every 4 years in March, that's taxpayer funded. That's not supposed to exist for one party or the other. And yet the Democrats seized control of it and said, Republicans, you can come along or not. And the Republicans are in a place where if they come along, they lose the bulk of their delegates. It's absolutely not right. I doubt it would stand up to a court challenge, because it's disenfranchising.
Your column in the Detroit News today.
It's disenfranchising half the state's voters.
Well, Portia, to that point, the governor said this past week that she thinks this is going to happen. That they're going to. They didn't. It's a really complicated thing on the Democratic side too, because they're going to have to adjourn the legislature earlier than they otherwise might, so that it has time to take effect. But aside from that, doesn't Governor Whitmer, isn't she have to be the governor for Michigan Republicans as well as Michigan Democrats? It's not in her best interest if Michigan Republicans aren't heard nationally, is it?
No, but I think there's no effort to silence Michigan Republicans. This is something that's been discussed for years, right? There have been a lot of negotiations about moving the primary in Michigan up. We've talked about it before right here on Flashpoint. And so this is not a surprise to anyone. I think what is difficult for Republicans is that right now their party is in shambles, and particularly for who's leading their party and how they're going to raise the money they need for the things they want to do. And so they really don't have a route that they need to move forward on. And so they're sort of shifting the blame back to Governor Whitmer and saying, she's caused this problem. She has not caused this problem. This is something that we've been talking about doing for quite some time, and I think we're moving in the right direction. And the governor said, I think there's going to be a primary early next year, and I hope that there is.
But, you can say we negotiated it for years. We didn't negotiate it this year, and there was no sign-off from the RNC. So it basically puts state Republicans in a no-win position. I mean, their national committee, just like the Democratic National Committee in previous years, have said, no, you can't go before March 1st. And you're telling Republicans, hey, that doesn't matter. We're going to put it at February 27th. If you lose your delegates, it's your problem. That's not the way this is supposed to work.
I agree. And, keep in mind, the Democrats, it doesn't appear they're going to have a contested primary. The Republicans are going to have a contested primary. So I think it's purposeful on behalf of Democrats to create a problem for Republicans by putting it on February 27th. And the solution is not great.
Republicans, though, were also for years talking about wanting states like Michigan, more diverse states, to move up in the primary system so that we weren't just relying on Iowa and New Hampshire to make all the decisions.
It's a good idea, but you can't just arbitrarily do it. You have to have the sign-off of your national committees. That's why it hasn't happened before. And so,
Well, then where does the problem lie? Then
I'm not sure this is not the exact situation Democrats want here, because it's more likely now Trump will get the delegates from Michigan and have a better chance of winning the nomination. And I can't think of anything they'd like better.
In fact, Portia, that's a fair question too. Wouldn't a challenge a Michigan primary that has other candidates in it? Be careful what you wish for. Just because Donald Trump wasn't really didn't lead the party in Michigan to success in the last go-round, is that necessarily, wouldn't Governor Whitmer be served by a wide-open Michigan Republican primary, too?
Listen, I don't think there is any situation where it's going to make it an easy road for Michigan Democrats. I think we need to take Trump just as seriously as we're going to take any of the people who are contesting him in the primary. And so if the delegates from the Republican Party decide that Trump is their guy, which it seems like they might, I don't think that that's going to make for an easy road by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, when you look at the polling numbers, Trump is doing very, very well and continues to do very, very well. So I don't think this is a setup so that, there's sort of a easy road for President Biden to move forward if Trump gets the nomination from the Republican Party here in Michigan.
Dave, you've been among the voices talking about whether or not it's time for us to start finding a third party, doesn't this help move your case forward a little bit?
Well, I think it does. I mean, the Republican Party in Michigan, as Nolan wrote a few months back, is dead, and has no hope in the near term of getting any kind of momentum. So if you look at our choices between Biden and Trump, I think we can do better. And so there's a couple efforts. The Common Sense Party, the No Labels Party, they're both pursuing third-party options. Historically, third parties have been a wasted vote, but maybe in 2024 that won't be the case.
Maybe dead, Nolan, on a statewide, if you look at statewide races after what happened.
I'm not so sure races. I'm talking about an organization.
Yes, but still a pretty split legislature, still a pretty split congressional delegation. I mean, there's still
a divided state. I think most recent polls show still a 50-50 break, and yet you have Democrats in Lansing governing as if this is a solid blue state, a huge Democratic majority, and it's not the case. And I think they're going to pay a price for that when it comes to 2024. You just can't force your will on half of the people who are diametrically opposed to what you're doing. This is a situation where they should be governing together, and they're not.
Well, let me let you all weigh in on what happened with the indictment. Anybody who's read the indictment, and I think a lot of people haven't, but it's pretty damning. supporters, and yet, as you point out, he's lost almost no support from
Nothing. Last week I was reading an article and somebody said they're persecuting my president and that means I pledge my further allegiance to him. So this is not distracted from the people who are supporters of Trump. I don't think it will. You know, I used to think that the next thing would be the thing that people sort of looked at and said no more to Trump, but that does not seem to be the case. I'm not even sure if he's in jail at the time of the primary that he would actually lose the primary.
I think he's already suggested that he would not necessarily suspend his campaign if that were to happen. Dave, your thoughts on what we're watching?
Well, you know, right after the indictments, they immediately said it's a hoax, it's a witch hunt, and I don't know how you defend and explain having our nuclear secrets by your shower and having our war plan against Iran in a public ballroom. You know, Trump has some kind of childish obsession with mementos. And knowing we were going to talk about this, I actually brought a memento with me today from my time in Congress. When the Pope Francis spoke to a joint session of Congress, I received this coin. And this is keeping this is not in violation of the Espionage Act. And Donald Trump needs to give back all the documents and
hang on to things like this.
Yeah, and hang on to things like this. And I think at this point in time, he has so many legal problems. I think the only person in this country who has more lawyers working for him is Bill Cosby.
Well, he has also had some lawyers quit, and apparently was having trouble finding some to add to his team as he went forward. But Nolan, they're really back to the I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue is where we are, right?
Well, we've reached the point. I mean, that you can't wholly blame Trump supporters and his loyalists. There's been so much wolf crying over these last 5-6 years. We've reached a point where you can't, for the Trump most loyal supporters, can't tell the difference between valid and vindictive. You know, particularly, it's not been that long since the Durham report. And, you know, a lot of his reporters said, see, I told you, they were persecuting him. And so, I mean, it's asking a lot of them to say, oh, no, this time, you know, they've got him. And, you know, they very well have. And Trump's the author, as always, of his own misery. But
I got to hustle to a break. Gang, thanks very much. Back with more. We'll wrap things up for Flashpoint right after this. Okay, 2024, a year and a half out. Are we Trump, Biden?
I don't think the president lasts that long.
Oh.
I think it's Trump, Biden, and the No Labels Party as a candidate.
A third.
Yes, and today I haven't seen anything that changes that.
All right. Thanks, gang, very much. Thank you for being here as well. Meet the Press next. We'll see you next time on Flashpoint.